All right, at this moment, world leaders are in Washington for NATO's 75th anniversary summit.
And the three-day event, of course, coincides with President Biden trying to reassure Democrats that he should be their nominee to face President Trump in the general election, as questions mount whether he's actually able to serve another 4 years as commander-in-chief. Now, the president kicked off the summit last night, delivering an impassioned speech to the guests.
To look back with pride at all we've achieved and look ahead to our shared future with strength and with resolve. Together, we rebuilt Europe from the ruins of war, held high the torch of liberty.
Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion, as you see there, joining us from Capitol Hill. Nikole, I'm curious what you're hearing from lawmakers now, since Democrats over the weekend, or at least I should mention that earlier today, Nancy Pelosi spoke to MSNBC about her thoughts specifically on whether the president should step aside from the campaign. Let's listen to that, get your response on the other side.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore. But he's beloved. He is respected, and people want him to make that decision. Not me.
How is that being interpreted, Nikole, and what do you make of that remark?
Well, first, I would note that we actually did speak with the Speaker Emerita ourselves as well, not long after she did that interview with MSNBC, and she said, tried to clarify her statement, telling us that I never said that he should reconsider his decision. The decision is the president's. So, which we did hear her say in that interview, but she feels like since then it's kind of been mischaracterized, that she's suggesting he reconsider being in the race, and she's saying no. I'm just saying this is ultimately the president's decision. So however you want to parse the words, that being said, you know, some people do feel that this is yet another signal and you know, that adds to this growing debate as to whether or not the president should remain at the top of the ticket. Now, we should again note that the president has made crystal clear in a letter to lawmakers at the beginning of this week and calls to members that he intends to stay in this race. It's a case he has been making to politicians of all stripes, you know, both not only here in Congress, but also, you know, with Democratic governors, with Democratic mayors. So that being said, it still does not seem to be doing enough to quell the concerns that some members seem to have. For instance, earlier today, I spoke with Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, who is in a very difficult Senate race right now, a very competitive Senate race. And what he told me and several other reporters is that some of his constituents have some legitimate concerns about the president, that he is trying to listen to those concerns, and yet he has not yet taken a definitive posture as to whether or not the president should step down. Although in a meeting yesterday with Senate Democrats, he, along with Senator John Tester and Michael Bennet, did express concerns about the president, some of which we heard from Bennet himself in an interview last night, saying that he believes that the former president is going to win this election. So, of course, this debate, very messy as it is, continues to happen in public as the president tries to press forward.
Well, and Nikole, I want to go deeper in something you said, because a lot of elected officials are facing pressure to fall in line with the rest of the party. But we, in addition to every day hearing from new bold-faced names, there are also names that are not Democrats, that are not in elected office, that have come out against the president moving forward with the Democratic nominee. Given that Biden is meeting with union leaders today as part of his campaign, how critical are those meetings?
Well, that is critical, too. I mean, look, you know, the president is in a big fight right now. He's trying to stay atop the ticket. And as we just discussed, he's trying to convince these key constituencies within his own party, whether that's elected officials or critical blocks of support, that he needs them to continue to have his back. So, you know, the meeting that he is having today with union leaders is very critical. We know he will be out on the campaign trail later this week in Michigan a key battleground, and many lawmakers here have continued to say they want to see how he does, on the campaign trail. They want to see how the rest of this NATO summit plays out, with the president holding a press conference tomorrow. So that being said, I would note, there is just a new editorial that from George Clooney, who has been a major Biden supporter, suggesting the president get out of the race. So, as much as he's trying to hold on to the position, there are still many calling on him to step aside.
Nikole Killion there for us at the Capitol. Thanks, Nikole.